There is a particular kind of fear that does not rush into the body, like panic, or scream through the mind like shock. It creeps, it seeps, it settles into the bones long before the danger is understood. Witnesses describe this fear not as the terror of being hunted or chased, but as the quiet, suffocating instinct that something in front of them is not what it appears to be. This is the fear that surrounds the phenomenon known as the black-eyed children, a modern mystery that has traveled across countries, continents, and decades, leaving behind reports so consistent and so unsettling that even skeptics struggle to dismiss them. The stories almost always begin the same way. It is late at night. A person is alone in their car or alone in their home. The world outside is still. Perhaps it is raining. Perhaps the wind is restless. Perhaps the night is too quiet. Then comes the sound, a knock on a window, a tap on a door, or a faint voice drifting through the dark. When the witness looks up, they see what appears to be a child, pale, expressionless, often wearing outdated clothing. The child does not cry. The child does not shiver. The child speaks softly, politely, and without any trace of emotion. They ask to be let inside. They ask for help. They ask to use a phone. They ask to be allowed into the car. Their words always sound rehearsed, as though they learned them from someone who had never heard a human speak. It is only when the witness's eyes adjust that the truth becomes visible. The child's eyes are entirely black, not dark, not shadowed. Completely black, from corner to corner, swallowing all light. Witnesses describe the eyes as bottomless, glossy, alien, insect-like, or void-like. But the most disturbing detail is not the appearance of the eyes. It is the feeling they create. People report overwhelming dread, nausea, pressure in the chest, and a primal instinct to flee. Every witness insists the same thing. No matter what those children are, they are not human. This phenomenon did not begin in ancient folklore. It did not come from medieval manuscripts or the oral traditions of old villages. It began here, in the modern world, in a time of electricity, cameras, streetlights, and logic. The first widely recorded account came from a respected journalist in 1996. But what makes the black-eyed children so deeply unnerving is that the encounters did not stop there. Reports began to spread across the United States, then across the United Kingdom, then across Canada and Australia. Police officers claimed to see them on patrol. Drivers found them standing beside rural roads in the dead of night. Families awoke to the sound of knocking and found two pale children waiting at the door, asking to be invited inside. The children are never wet in the rain. They are never cold in the snow. They never seem to breathe. They never blink. And no matter how frightened the witness becomes, the children do not react. They stand still, as though waiting for permission to enter, permission to approach, permission to cross a boundary they cannot cross alone. The consistency of these cases is what makes the phenomenon impossible to dismiss. Every witness, regardless of age, profession, or location, describes the same details with eerie precision. The children's emotionless voices, their strange vocabulary, their unnatural calm, their insistence on being invited inside, their refusal to leave until the witness turns away, and above all, their eyes deep, black, endless, and watching, always watching. There is no single explanation for what these children are. Some believe they are extraterrestrial. Others believe they are demonic mimics, unable to enter without permission. A few whisper that they are spirits of the lost, changed by something beyond human understanding. But whatever they are, the world has seen them. The encounters continue. And somewhere, under the weight of modern lights and the hum of modern machines, people still hear the knock at the door when the night grows too quiet. The black-eyed children do not chase. They do not attack. They do not force their way inside. They wait. They ask. They request entrance like polite shadows, standing on the edge of reality. And once you see their eyes, once you understand that the thing in front of you is wearing the shape of a child, but is nothing close to human, the night around you will never feel the same again. Because the most terrifying part of the legend is this: people all over the world still see them. And if the stories are true, they only ever appear when you are alone. The modern legend of the black-eyed children began not with rumors, not with campfire tales, and not with anonymous internet posts, but with a respected journalist, a man trained to observe, verify, and report with accuracy. His name was Brian Bethel, and at the time of his encounter, he worked for a newspaper in Abilene, Texas. He was rational, grounded, and known for his calmness under pressure. Nothing in his life or personality suggested that he would become the unwitting catalyst for one of the most disturbing paranormal phenomena of the late 20th century. It happened on an ordinary evening in 1996. Bethel was driving near a strip of cinemas, planning to drop off a bill payment before heading home. As he parked near a bright streetlight to write the check, his attention drifted for a moment. When he looked up, 2 boys stood beside his car window. He had not heard them walk over. The air was still. The night was quiet. Yet there they were, close enough for him to see their faces clearly. They looked to be around 12 or 13 years old, dressed in odd, outdated clothes. Their skin was pale, almost grey, and their expressions were flat, devoid of the natural nervousness or curiosity children usually show when approaching an adult. Bethel rolled down his window only a few centimeters. Before he could speak, the older boy stepped forward and began talking. His voice was calm and strangely formal, as if rehearsed. He explained that he and his younger companion wanted to watch a film at the cinema, but had forgotten their money at home. They asked Bethel for a ride. They did not smile. They did not shift their weight. They simply stared at him with the stillness of mannequins. Bethel later wrote that nothing the boys said made sense. The tone of their voices was wrong. Their choice of words was wrong. There was no laughter, no nervousness, no sign of ordinary childhood behavior. When Bethel hesitated, the older boy grew insistent. He said the phrase witnesses around the world would later report hearing in almost identical circumstances. "You must let us in. We cannot come in unless you invite us." That single sentence broke Bethel's composure. An overwhelming wave of fear washed over him, not panic, but a primal sense that something was terribly, dangerously wrong. His hand moved toward the door lock without him realizing it. Then, as if the motion triggered something, the boys' expressions changed. They leaned closer to the glass, and that was when Bethel saw their eyes properly. Not dark, not shadowed, completely black. Every part of the eye, from corner to corner, was a seamless field of ink. The darkness reflected the streetlights, gleaming like polished stone. There were no pupils, no whites, no emotion, just depthless, impossible black. The moment he saw this, Bethel's instincts exploded with terror. He scrambled to start the car, but the older boy continued speaking, his voice growing colder, sharper, as though he could sense Bethel's fear. He insisted again that they needed to be let inside the vehicle. He stated that it would only take a moment. He said there was nothing to fear, but Bethel was already pulling away. He drove so fast that he barely remembered the next few minutes. When he finally stopped at a safe distance, he realized his hands were shaking uncontrollably. He had encountered something that defied logic, a pair of children that were not children, speaking in a voice that felt like a script, staring with eyes that did not belong to any human being. When Bethel eventually shared his story, he did so reluctantly. He knew the risk to his credibility. But what he could not predict was how many people across states, across countries, across decades, would recognize his experience as their own. His encounter was not the beginning of the phenomenon. It was simply the first time someone with a public voice had dared to speak about it. Because after Bethel's account went public, something chilling happened. Reports began pouring in. People who had stayed silent out of fear. People who believed no one would ever believe them. People who had seen the same pale figures, heard the same rehearsed voices, and felt the same overwhelming dread. The phenomenon had a name now. It had witnesses, it had documentation, and it had just begun. As reports spread across the world, after Brian Bethel shared his experience, one detail became impossible to ignore. Every encounter with the black-eyed children followed the same chilling pattern. It did not matter if the witness lived in a quiet town in Texas, a suburb in Birmingham, a rural road in Alberta, or a coastal village in Australia. The descriptions were so consistent that it seemed the children were following a script or operating according to rules that had nothing to do with human behavior. The encounters almost always took place at night. The hours just after midnight were the most common, but some sightings occurred in the moments before dawn, when the world feels suspended between dreaming and waking. Witnesses were often alone, with no distractions, as though isolation was a requirement for the children to appear. The setting varied, but the feeling never did. Whether it was a doorstep, a car park, a deserted bus stop, or the side of a remote road, witnesses described the moment before the encounter as strangely still, as though the night itself had inhaled. Then came the knock. Sometimes soft, sometimes unnervingly rhythmic. Witnesses described hearing it and immediately feeling something was wrong, even before they saw the figures standing outside. Dogs often refused to approach the door, hiding or growling at something their owners could not yet see. Electronics malfunctioned, lights flickered, the temperature seemed to drop. And then the witness would look outside and see them. 1 or 2 children, usually pale, always still, always staring. The children's faces were the first sign that something was not right. They appeared emotionless, as though wearing expressions they had been taught rather than naturally formed. Their clothes were often outdated hoodies from the early 90s, dresses from the 70s, school uniforms that had not been used for decades. Witnesses remarked that the clothing looked borrowed, mismatched, or slightly too large, as if the children did not understand how humans dressed but were trying to imitate it. Their speech was the second sign. When the children spoke, their voices were calm and strangely formal, lacking contractions, slang, or normal childlike mannerisms. They did not fumble their words. They did not hesitate. They did not laugh or cry. They spoke with precision, as though reciting lines they had memorized perfectly. Their requests were always similar. We need to come in. Please let us inside. We need to use your phone. Our parents will be worried. Let us in. It is safe. The tone of their voices was described as cold, flat, and oddly adult. Witnesses reported feeling pressured, manipulated, or hypnotized, as though the children's speech was designed to override instinct. But no matter how persuasive the words sounded, the overwhelming sense of danger never faded. In fact, the longer the interaction continued, the stronger the fear became. The pattern grew even more disturbing when witnesses described what happened if they refused. The children did not cry, become angry, or leave in frustration. They simply stood still and watched, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours. They did not blink. They did not shift. They did not breathe visibly. They waited, as though permission was a rule they could not break, a rule woven into their very nature. Only when the witness broke eye contact, closed the blinds, or retreated deeper into the house would the children disappear. Not walk away, not fade into the distance, simply vanish. When the witness checked the cameras or opened the door again, there was nothing there. No footprints, no sound, no trace. What made the pattern of these encounters so terrifying was not just the children's appearance or behavior, but the instinctive reaction they provoked. Witnesses described an animal-level fear, a suffocating dread, an overwhelming certainty that if they opened the door or unlocked the car, something irreversible would happen. Many said they felt as though they were being watched by a predator disguised in the shape of a child. And no matter who told the story, whether it was a truck driver, a mother, a police officer, or a soldier, the emotional core of the account was always the same. I do not know what they were, but they were not children. This pattern, repeated across continents and decades, shaped the legend into something far bigger than a single encounter. It became a global phenomenon, a warning, a behavior, a presence that seemed to appear wherever fear and isolation met. And the next wave of reports would come from witnesses whose credibility could not be questioned. People trained to trust their senses, report the truth, and face danger without hesitation. The reports that followed were not written by frightened teenagers or anonymous internet users. They came from people whose jobs depended on accuracy, clarity, and courage. Police officers, security guards, military personnel, emergency dispatchers, and night shift workers began describing encounters that matched the exact pattern established years earlier. What unsettled researchers most was not the number of reports, but the consistency. These witnesses came from different countries, different cultures, and different environments, yet their experiences were nearly identical. No exchange of stories could explain it. Something else was happening. One of the earliest official reports came from a police officer in the United Kingdom who responded to a call from a couple living in a rural area outside Staffordshire. The couple insisted that two children had been standing outside their farmhouse for nearly an hour. When the officer arrived, he found the husband visibly shaking, his face pale with a fear he struggled to describe. The officer listened patiently, expecting to hear a simple explanation involving trespassing teenagers or lost travelers. But the moment the couple mentioned the children's eyes, the officer felt a shiver run through him. He searched the area and found nothing. No footprints, no disturbance in the mud, no sign that anyone had stood there. But the couple's terror was genuine. They refused to return to the front windows for days. In another incident, a US Marine stationed at a remote base in the Midwest reported seeing two children standing at the edge of the floodlights during a night patrol. At first, he assumed they were dependents of personnel, wandering too far from their housing units. But when he called out, the children did not respond. They simply stared at him with perfect stillness. When he raised his flashlight, the beam reflected off their eyes like polished obsidian. The Marine later wrote in his report that he felt the most profound sense of danger he had ever experienced, even compared to live combat drills. When he took his eyes off them for a moment to radio for assistance, they disappeared. The sand beneath their feet was undisturbed. Taxi drivers have told similarly disturbing stories. One driver in Manchester picked up what he believed was a young girl standing alone near a shopping centre late at night. She slid into the back seat without speaking. The driver asked where her parents were, but she remained silent. When he adjusted his mirror to check on her, he froze. Her eyes were two black spheres, glassy and hollow. She smiled then, slowly, deliberately, and whispered, "You should not have let me in." The driver slammed the brakes and turned around, only to find the back seat empty. The door had never opened. The child had simply vanished. Security footage has occasionally surfaced in relation to these encounters. In 2014, a video circulated among paranormal investigators showing two children knocking on the door of a convenience store in Ohio shortly before closing. Their heads remained lowered so that the cameras could not see their faces. The store clerk refused to open the door, reporting later that he felt a wave of terror the moment he approached. When he stepped into the back room to call the police, the knocking stopped abruptly. By the time officers arrived, the children were gone. Reviewing the footage revealed something even stranger. In the frames where their faces should have been visible, the camera showed only distortion, as though the lens itself refused to capture them. Other witnesses described roadside encounters. Drivers traveling long stretches of empty highway at night reported seeing a child standing on the shoulder, illuminated in the headlights. Some slowed down, believing the child was hurt, only to realize that the face staring back at them was entirely wrong. The black eyes seemed to absorb the light, not reflect it. The skin appeared to pale, almost wax-like. Several drivers claimed that the child attempted to approach the car, walking with stiff, unnatural movements that did not match a human body at all. At least one driver reported that the temperature inside the car dropped so sharply that her breath became visible, even though the heater was on full. What made these encounters particularly disturbing was the aftermath. Witnesses often reported nightmares, sleep paralysis, sudden sickness, or a persistent sense of being watched long after the encounter ended. Some described seeing shadows near their windows at night for several days. Others heard knocking long after no one was there. A few claimed that the children returned more than once, always asking the same question: "Will you let us in this time?" None of these witnesses were known for superstition. They were not prone to panic. They were individuals who dealt with danger frequently. Some had faced violence, death, or war. Yet the presence of these children filled them with a fear that no training could prepare them for. The deeper investigators looked, the clearer the pattern became. These were not isolated hallucinations. They were not misidentified animals or frightened children seeking help. They were something else. Something that behaved with intelligence, intention, and purpose. Something that arrived uninvited and could not cross the threshold without permission. And the next question researchers asked was the one that would lead the legend into far more disturbing territory. If these encounters are happening worldwide, who or what are these children imitating? As the encounters multiplied across countries and decades, researchers, folklorists, psychologists, and paranormal investigators tried to explain what these beings could be. But each theory only deepened the mystery. No explanation fits every detail, yet every explanation fits something. What emerged was a catalogue of possibilities, each one unsettling in its own way. The first theory that gained traction was the idea that the black-eyed children were extraterrestrial in origin. Supporters of this theory pointed to the children's pale skin, emotionless behavior, and the overwhelming fear witnesses described. These details were eerily similar to reports involving so-called grey aliens, entities often described as cold, expressionless, and telepathic. The children's excessively formal speech and their habit of appearing in remote locations only added support. Some witnesses even claimed they felt a pressure inside their heads, as if their thoughts were being nudged. But this theory could not explain why the children always sought permission to enter a behavior more rooted in folklore than outer space. This led others to a very different explanation: demonic mimicry. In many cultures, harmful entities are believed to mimic the shapes of children because children naturally inspire trust and compassion. The black eyes, the unnatural stillness, and the overwhelming dread felt by witnesses all aligned with traditional descriptions of malevolent spirits. The rule that they required permission to enter homes or cars also matched centuries of demonological belief, where certain entities were bound by thresholds. But this theory struggled with the children's physical presence. They cast shadows, they left condensation on glass, they spoke clearly and interacted with the physical world. They were not illusions. They were tangible. Another theory connected the phenomenon to Fae folklore, specifically changelings and borrowed forms. In old Celtic traditions, supernatural beings were said to adopt human shapes imperfectly, creating versions that looked almost right but somehow wrong. The outdated clothing, the unnatural speech, and the insect-like black eyes resembled descriptions of the not-quite-human beings found in pre-Christian stories. These entities were also believed to need permission to cross thresholds, just like the black-eyed children. Yet this explanation faltered when confronted with the global nature of the sightings. Changeling myths belonged to specific cultures, but the black-eyed children appeared in regions with no such traditions. The psychological theory was the least supernatural, but still troubling. Some researchers suggested the encounters were expressions of sleep deprivation, night terrors, or waking hallucinations triggered by stress. But this fell apart when witnesses described events that occurred while fully awake, fully alert, and often in groups. Multiple people saw the children at the same time. Security cameras and dashcams occasionally captured their silhouettes. Dogs reacted to their presence. Electronics malfunctioned. Fear alone could not produce these effects. Then came a theory that ventured far deeper into the unknown: parasitic entities. Some investigators proposed that the children were neither spirits nor aliens, but something in between, beings that fed on human fear or emotional energy. Their behavior supported this idea. They never broke in, never attacked physically, and never forced entry. They waited for permission. They lingered on the edge of human boundaries, as though testing whether the witness would surrender control. Their existence seemed to revolve around consent, as if crossing a threshold without permission weakened or erased their power. This theory became even more disturbing when researchers noted that encounters were often followed by sudden illness, nightmares, or a lingering sense of dread that lasted for weeks. A few witnesses reported feeling drained or fatigued, as if the children had taken something from them without touching them at all. If these beings required permission to enter, it might not be because of folklore or culture. It might be a biological rule, a rule that protected the witness until they willingly lowered their guard. Finally, there was the theory that frightened researchers more than all the others combined. The idea that the black-eyed children were not a singular phenomenon, but a test, a probe, an attempt by something unknown to see how humans react to the sight of something that is almost human, but not quite. Their appearance as children, their outdated clothing, and their attempts at polite speech suggested imitation rather than identity, as though they were learning how to mimic humanity more accurately. In this theory, the children were early versions, incomplete copies, imprecise, unsettling, and obvious enough to trigger instinctive fear. And if these were early versions, the question that followed was inevitable. Would later versions look more convincing? Would they learn? Would they adapt? Would they return wearing a new face, one that triggered no fear at all? Despite countless theories, one truth remained consistent across every account. Every witness, every encounter. The black-eyed children behaved with intelligence and intention. They appeared with purpose. They stood just outside the boundary between safety and danger, and they waited for a choice that only the witness could make. By the early 2000s, the black-eyed children phenomenon shifted from isolated, rare encounters to something far more widespread. Reports began emerging not just from the United States and the United Kingdom, but from Canada, Australia, South Africa, Mexico, and parts of Europe. What disturbed researchers most was that the descriptions did not evolve with time. The children did not change their appearance. They did not adopt modern clothing styles. They did not update their speech patterns. It was as though they remained frozen in the same strange form, even as the world around them moved into a new century. The question naturally formed: why did sightings increase? Why did a phenomenon that had existed quietly in the shadows suddenly spread across the world with frightening speed? The simplest explanation pointed to the rise of the internet, which allowed people to share encounters that they would have previously kept secret. However, this theory failed immediately, because many of the new reports came from individuals who had never heard of the black-eyed children before their encounter. Elderly witnesses, isolated rural residents, individuals without access to online communities. They told their stories reluctantly, often through local authorities or documented interviews, long before they realized others had experienced the same thing. Some investigators proposed that the increase in sightings was linked to growing global stress. The turn of the millennium brought anxieties over technology, political tension, war, and the uncertainty of a rapidly changing world. Certain paranormal phenomena are believed to manifest more frequently during waves of collective human fear or emotional disturbance. But this idea did not explain why the children's behavior remained unchanged, nor why they appeared in countries experiencing vastly different social climates. Something else had to be driving the rise. A darker theory suggested that the children's presence multiplied because they were learning. Early witnesses described them as stiff, formal, and unnatural. But some of the more recent reports included new details. The children smiled more often, used more natural speech patterns, and even imitated subtle emotional cues. They still failed to fully blend in, but the changes were noticeable. It was as if they were adapting slowly, observing humans and refining their imitation. This led some theorists to believe the children were prototypes of something larger, early versions sent to gather information, and the sudden rise in sightings meant their numbers were increasing, or their purpose was becoming more urgent. Another explanation tied the surge in encounters to the concept of threshold events. In folklore, across many cultures, entities that cannot fully enter the human world are said to gather in increasing numbers when a significant shift is approaching. A natural disaster, a societal collapse, or a major turning point in human history. The years following 2000 were filled with global changes, technological revolutions, political instability, climate anomalies, and widespread psychological stress. Some researchers argue that these conditions may have weakened certain boundaries, making it easier for the children to appear. Not cross fully, but appear. Just enough for witnesses to see them. Then there is the theory that disturbed even skeptics, the idea that sightings increased simply because the children wanted to be seen. Their presence at windows, doorways, roadside shoulders, and car parks seems intentional, purposeful, almost strategic. They never wander. They never appear lost. They stand exactly where a human would be forced to make a choice. To open a door, unlock a vehicle, or step into the shadows. The increase in sightings may reflect not a change in the world, but a change in them, a shift in their mission, a new phase in whatever they are trying to do. What makes this theory terrifying is the implication behind it. If the children are appearing more frequently, perhaps it is because they have become more confident. Perhaps they are discovering new ways to approach their targets. Perhaps they are refining their ability to mimic humanity. And perhaps the sudden rise in sightings means they are preparing for something larger, an event that requires human invitation. Despite the theories, one fact stands above all others. After the year 2000, the phenomenon became global. No culture seemed immune. No continent was excluded. No environment was too rural, too urban, too wealthy, or too remote. Wherever humans lived, the black-eyed children appeared, always after dark, always in pairs or alone, always asking to be let inside. And the people who saw them, the people who felt that ancient instinctive fear, all described the same truth. The children left them with the sense that something was coming, something patient, something intelligent, something waiting just outside the boundary that separates the human world from whatever reality these beings belong to. There is a reason the black-eyed children linger in the mind long after the story ends. They do not behave like ghosts, for ghosts do not knock. They do not behave like animals, for animals do not imitate speech. They do not behave like humans, for humans do not stand silently in the dark, waiting for permission to enter. Whatever they are, their existence challenges something deep within us, the instinct that recognizes danger long before the mind understands it. Every witness who encounters them describes the same sensation, a primal certainty that the thing standing outside the door has no place in the human world. The black-eyed children never force their way in. They never break windows, never attempt to push open doors, never chase. They behave as though bound by a rule older than civilization, older than folklore, a rule that says they cannot cross a threshold without being welcomed. This fact is what makes their presence so unnerving. They do not demand entry. They ask for it. They wait for it. And they wait with the calmness of beings who have all the time in the world. Even today, reports of them continue. A lone driver on a dark road slows down when he sees what looks like a child walking in the fog. A woman hears knocking at her door at 3 in the morning and sees 2 pale figures standing beneath her porch light. A night shift worker finds a pair of children waiting silently outside the building just after all the lights flicker. In each case, the pattern repeats. The request to come inside, the emotionless faces, the vague, unnerving phrases, the way their black eyes swallow the light without reflecting anything back. And then there is what happens afterward, the nightmares, the sense of being watched, the tapping at windows that stops when the witness stands up to check. It is as if the children do not simply disappear. They step back into a place where they can see us, even when we can no longer see them. Some witnesses feel their presence for days, others feel it for months. A few claim they never fully shake the sense that someone is standing just outside their field of vision. The black-eyed children have no origin story. They have no homeland the way the green children of Woolpit did. They have no ancient myth that explains their purpose. They have no culture attached to their image. They arrived suddenly, without warning, in a world of bright lights and modern machines, and they behaved as though they understood humanity better than humanity understood itself. Their eyes are the only part of them that tells the truth, that the shape they wear is not their real form. It is a mask, a disguise, a study of human comfort designed to fail just enough to trigger instinctive fear. The most unsettling question is not what they are, but why they come, why they appear only at night, why they seek entry into human spaces, why they wait instead of forcing their way in, why they imitate children instead of adults, and why, despite countless sightings, there are no known accounts of what happens if someone says yes. Perhaps the most terrifying possibility is the simplest one. Someone, somewhere, has said yes, and no one lived long enough to report what happened next. The black-eyed children will continue to knock on doors, appear beside cars, and stand beneath porch lights on silent nights. Their numbers may grow, their imitation may improve, their purpose may soon reveal itself. But until then, one truth remains. They wait in the dark for the moment someone opens the door. And if you ever hear a knock at night, and the voice on the other side sounds calm, polite, and strangely rehearsed, do not answer, do not look, do not let them in. Because once you see the eyes, you will understand the fear every witness described. And once you understand that fear, the night around you will never feel empty again.